morning, everybody. My name is Dick Martin. I'm an alcoholic. Well, it's getting a little better, a little quieter. But for the grace of God and the actions of AA and sponsorship, I've been sober since September the 15th, 1965, and I'm very grateful for that. I've had a really good weekend this weekend so far, and I expected it'll just keep on rolling until end of Sheila's talk. I'm looking forward to hearing her this morning. The Cornhusker Roundup is just it's my favorite roundup, and I go to a lot of them. And this one to me, has all the elements of fun and that you would want to have in a roundup or in a convention of Alcoholics Anonymous. God knows we've cried long enough. It's good to laugh, and I think that the essence of this conference is one of having a good time, and I think if it does that, then I think that it does it successfully. My theme this morning is into action. I understand. John gives me those, these assignments every year, and I never pay any attention to them. And so he says, I'm going to make them broad enough so you can talk about anything. And that's what I end up doing. I end up talking about anything. I very recently, matter of fact, on the 12th of August, I celebrated 37 years with living with the same woman without benefit of clergy. We were talking about it. The 12th fell on a Tuesday. And we were talking about that on Sunday and said, well, our anniversary's coming up. What are we going to do? And this, that, and the other. And, this was happening on Monday night. This was happening on, Tuesday night's Foxhall, so we couldn't go to dinner that night. And decided she had a dinner with a pigeon of hers that evening who was celebrating an anniversary. And then Wednesday night we had something else going on. I've forgotten what it was, but it doesn't make any difference. It was important at the time. And so we both kind of just left it in the air, floating around up there somewhere. And Tuesday came, Monday came and passed, and Tuesday came, and both of us had just forgotten about it. And went to work. I mean, normally we give each other cards at least or something like that. We just went to work, and along about 10:30 in the morning, she comes sneaking into the office, and she had into my office, and she had a dozen long stem red roses. She said, "Gotcha." And I thought to myself, very quiet things, but I went out and I got her a gift and that sort of thing. But our wedding anniversary, as important as it is, it's just something that's important to us in a visceral sort of way, I suppose. And AA anniversaries are a lot more important. Even other people's anniversaries are a lot more important. The most important anniversary that we have is the anniversary of our sobriety. And we met in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we always go to a meeting on our anniversary, and because that's where it began. That's what it's all about. Our life is Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the style of life that we have. And that allows us both to stay sober. In the coming months, she's going to be sober for 40 years. God, next month I'll be sober for 38 years. And I tell you, it's not easy going to bed with an old-timer every night. I mean, I may have a few years on her and that sort of thing, but as I do, but now that I'm in my 70s, I contemplate things a little bit differently than I used to. But main thing is we got here, and I got here. I'm not going to tell our story, if you will. I'm going to tell my story. I got here on the basis of the fact that I could no longer safely drink. When I first came to AA, I heard a lot of people say things like, I can't drink. Alcoholics are people who can't drink. And I thought to myself, well, maybe that's true for you, but that sure as hell isn't true for me. If you don't believe me, go check the police blotters. And because I was arrested 23 times for public intoxication. And, that's pretty good evidence. And, check my psychiatrist out and see what he has to say about all this. Because I went to my last psychiatrist, I went to twice a week for a year and a half. And I ended up thinking that I was just all screwed up. Anybody that goes to a psychiatrist is nuts in the first place. I want to make that clear to you. But I didn't have the type of mental illness, if you will, that could be treated by psychiatry. And I went and I saw a couple of ministers, and these guys, they were very nice. One of them said, "Well, Dick, if you quit drinking, I'll get you set up so that you could be a chaperone, and you can take some of these young teenagers out on the weekend to go camping and things." No, that was the last damn thing I ever wanted to do. The other one wanted to pray over me and did, and that didn't do any good. Just made me feel sheepish. And I saw a couple of physicians. One physician, first one I went to see, told me if I didn't quit drinking, I was going to die drunk, which is true. But he didn't give me any solution at all. The second one said that they've come out with something new, and he gave me an open-ended prescription for Librium, and I thought that would be a good idea because I was shackled to alcohol. I would be released from the burden, I suppose. Mostly I thought maybe I would be able to sleep at night. Mostly I thought maybe I would be able to take these things and I wouldn't have the shakes. And I could continue drinking. And all it did was just make me a very dull drunk. And I'd quit taking them, and, I didn't have any withdrawals from anything because I just drank more, went on from there. But I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had people around me tell me what to do. I didn't know what to do. If I'd have known what to do, I never would have come to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know not to take that first drink, just one day at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, or whatever it took. I didn't know what actions to take to relieve me of the bondage of self. And I learned those in Alcoholics Anonymous because people told me what I should do. They told me what they had done. And they said, this is what we have done. If you do this, you're going to get the same results that we have. You're going to have long-term continued sobriety. And I believed them. And some of them aren't. Some of them forgot what they were talking about, and they're not sober today, and they've died drunk. But my first sponsor was a fellow named Buck Doyle, and Buck died sober. He was a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was a very active AA member and great 12-stepper. I went on, I don't know how many 12-step calls with him. I mean, when I say that, it was, well, in the 5 years I lived in Washington, D.C., and he was living there at the same time. In that period of time, I'm sure we went on more than 200 12-step calls. And we had a great time. It was a great adventure. I watched the master, and I carried the bag, if you will, and I was very quiet and just sat there and listened most of the time. But every now and then he'd get up and go get a drink of water, and I'd take over and so on. But I really learned a lot about me. It wasn't that I learned so much about them, but I learned a lot about me by going on a 12-step call. I learned about my weaknesses and what I could do and how I could fill in those chinks so I could be the man that I wanted to be. I never espoused to want to be some great thing or president of the United States or anything like that. I never had any great desire to do that. But I just wanted to be a good man. I didn't want to be one of these people that had arrest records, and I had one. And I didn't want to be a one of these guys that gets married and gets divorced and leaves kids behind in that marriage and all that. And I had all of that. I did all of those things. And I wanted to be a person who would show up and do what they said they were going to do when they said they were going to do it. And I couldn't do that. And I wanted to be a guy who was, who could be depended upon. I wanted to be a good citizen. I wanted to be a good neighbor and a good friend. But I was unable to do those things anymore. And came to Alcoholics Anonymous. And AA taught me one day at a time how to do those things, how to do the best that I could do that day, and how to be, kind and considerate of other people and put their feelings ahead of my own and put their needs ahead of mine. Because if I helped them fulfill their needs, my needs would automatically be fulfilled. And so I learned to do those things. I learned to do things like, he was mentioning, I've always had a kind of, I've got a kind of potty mind, I guess. I've always checked the men's room and the women's room at a meeting after the meetings are over, and the women's room is always messier than the men's room. I don't know why that is, but that's true. And but it's something that you don't think about doing, but that's been my service commitment for over 37 years now. And just something that I do. It's not a big deal. I pick the paper towels up off the floor and put them in the hopper and whatever, just whatever it is. Try to make the world a little better place, because I sure messed it up a lot when I was drinking, when I was living that other life of mine. When you talk about, as I was talking about the fact that I had forgotten our wedding anniversary. Being married is a kind of a difficult thing sometimes for any of us. But we do a lot of traveling, both of us. And sometimes she goes to the East Coast and I go to the West, and vice versa. And as an end result of that, we oftentimes, we're just kind of like ships passing in the dark sometimes, it seems like to me, and it seems like that to her too. And kind of reminds me of the people who are taking a train, transcontinental, and they had sleeping berths. This man got in the lower berth, and some woman that he didn't know was in the upper berth. And they were going along, and the woman that was in the upper berth leaned over and said, do you have an extra blanket down there? I'm getting very cold. He said, no, but he says, I got an idea, honey. She says, what's that? Why don't we just act like we're married? And she giggled and said, well, okay. And he says, why don't you get your own damn blanket? Into action. That's what it's all about. But you got to take your own actions. Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where you've got to learn to do your thing. It's not into thinking, it's into action. There isn't a chapter that's designed for thinkers in Alcoholics Anonymous. And you can always tell the thinkers in AA because you can sniff them out in the crowd. They smell like whiskey. Those people that are into action and doing the things that are necessary and reaching out and trying to help somebody else, and mostly reaching out and trying to help someone else, because this is what it's all about. This is what staying sober is all about. This is about telling your story to somebody else so that they can overcome their own thoughts and misgivings enough to take on faith what you say and follow you and take the steps and recover from this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It's not an easy thing to do. There's none of us that came here dancing into AA and said, oh boy, I'm just going to pick up a new dance step and, life is going to get better from there. It's something else entirely different than that. But in looking back at it, and as you can and as I can. It's not as hard as we thought it was going to be. And if you're new in AA and you look at the steps and you think, God, I can never do those, I can never take a fifth step, till he's got them memorized all the way up to the sixth step, so we know where he is. You got to be cautious of these people who memorize chapter 5 and get up and spout it off to you. Most of them don't do anything else in AA, but they got that down pat. I think it's so real important that we end up recognizing that we're surrendering. You know, it's Chuck Chamberlain is reputed to have gone to some alcoholism ward and spoken there and had conversations with the people who were working there, and came out and said, well, what did you think about that, Chuck? Because he'd never been to one of those before. And he said, well, he says, it's okay, but he says, they don't seem to know much about surrender. And if you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you're involved in reaching out and trying to help somebody else, and if you're taking the actions and taking the steps and understanding and fully conceding to your innermost self that you're alcoholic, however you do that, everybody does it differently. There's no question about that. It's not done the same way by any two people in Alcoholics Anonymous. We all surrender differently, but we end up surrendering because we have no choice. That's what we do. That's what we have to do. And that surrender is being into action. That surrender is saying that of and by myself I can't drink safely, and of and by myself I can't stay sober. And that's surrendering to a power greater than yourself. And you think about the steps, and you think about the inferences and the direct directions of getting in touch with God as you understand Him and that sort of thing. And everybody, avoids that when they're new in AA. Those that the ministers and the priests and the pastors who come to Alcoholics Anonymous to get and stay sober are amazed that they know a lot about God, but they don't understand the nature of God. The nature of God is, to me, as far as I'm concerned, is one of kindness and consideration and love and integrity and gentleness and just a real warmth and a protectiveness. And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is. I think that God and AA and all of those things, I think they're all synonymous. I think they all mean the same thing. I think we all come from that same mixture. And we just, like a bowl of life, if you will, and in there is a tablespoon of love and a tablespoon of kindness and a tablespoon of integrity and so on and so forth. And it's just a mixture. And we take our sustenance from that bowl, and we end up being able to stay sober. And when we walk away from that bowl and no longer see that as our cauldron of life, then we don't stay sober anymore. A lot of people come to Alcoholics Anonymous and stay sober and are very active in AA, and along about 5 years or 6 years they think to themselves, well, I've done everything it's necessary to do. I've paid back. I've helped people. I've done this. I've been in service. I've done everything I need to do. I have a family now. I've got a good living, got a good car, got a good watch. No longer Timexes are shiny and gold. And I don't have to do this stuff anymore. I'll cut down. I'll go to one meeting a week or maybe two, unless it falls on some evening or that something else comes up that's better, like a good TV show. And they wander away from Alcoholics Anonymous, and they don't mean to do that. They're not angry about it. They're not. They don't think that they're putting themselves in jeopardy at all. They just think it's okay. They think they have to get on with life and get on with living. And they forget that we're bodily and mentally different from our fellows. We're not the same. We have to maintain this spiritual condition, as Earl was talking about last night. It's the maintenance of the spiritual condition that keeps us going. It's nothing else. It isn't the spiritual condition. That's not anything permanent. We have to keep dipping into that cauldron of life a day at a time. And as we do that, we end up staying sober a day at a time. And we end up being entirely different people than what people knew us to be. And we end up being so different that we don't even recognize ourselves sometimes. We think, that's not natural to me. I'm doing things that are unnatural to me, and I'm enjoying them. And I feel different, and I have a different attitude, and I have a different outlook on life. And it's because of the actions that I've been taking. It's not because of anything I've been thinking about. It isn't that I know that I'm able to recite chapter 5 or recite anything. It isn't. The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is a very important part of our whole makeup here, because that's where the program of Alcoholics Anonymous lies. And just to be, very simple about it, everything else that we know of Alcoholics Anonymous, this meeting, the meetings this weekend, your own home group, your relationship with your sponsor, on and on and on. That's not the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. The reason why Alcoholics Anonymous, as people call it a 12-step movement, and it's not a 12-step movement. Our own preamble says, which is the definition of AA, says Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. It doesn't say it's a 12-step program, because it's not a 12-step program. We use the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous for our recovery, but your sponsor can't take them for you. You got to take them yourself. You're the one that has to make the surrender. I'm the one that had to fully concede to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic and I couldn't take a drink safely, that I couldn't have a drop of alcohol because a drop was a drink and a drink was a drunk. And one drink is too many and 1,000's not enough. I had to know that. I have to know that on my insides. I have to know that where my heart is. I have to know it viscerally, as I mentioned a while ago. It's an internal thing. It's not an external thing at all. Clancy was remarking that, we have all the answers are on the inside, and we're the ones that have the capacity to be able to open the insides and to help ourselves. No one else can do it for us. No one else can stay sober for you. No one else can make you stay sober. No one can give you a magic answer. There's nothing magic in Alcoholics Anonymous except the very idea that you can change your life if you change your actions. And if you change your actions, your thinking will change. Now, you're going to sit there and say to yourself, like I did, well, you got to think about it in order to do it. You have to think about the action and take the action. Thinking about the action isn't going to help you. Taking the action is what helps you. Thinking doesn't do you any good. You can leave your brain parked right outside the door when you go to an AA meeting. Come to AA as a little child is what I was told. Just act like you don't know nothing. Because if you're new, you don't. No. I'm telling you, I didn't. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about staying sober. I didn't know how to get along with people. If I'd have known how to do that, I never would have come to Alcoholics Anonymous. I never would have had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. So we come to Alcoholics Anonymous and we take the actions and we change and we're different people. We're bodily and mentally different from our fellows. I remember my son, Jim, when he was in high school and he was drinking, using, and all that sort of thing. He would come home sometimes and just literally sit and weep because his friends were not serious about life and life wasn't important to them. It was all frivolous, and how many alligators they have on their shirt or whatever, and how cute they could be and how well they looked and that sort of thing. And he wanted some friends who would talk about friendship. He wanted some friends who would understand what love really was, one human being to another human being. He wanted some of that. And he saw that his mother had that, and he saw that I had that. And he wanted that. But he didn't have any idea how to achieve it. And in his own frustration and his own alcoholism, he drank and used until that didn't work anymore, and came to Alcoholics Anonymous and found it. Period. It's here. It's here. That's why we come here. We come to renew our lives on a daily basis. We come to learn what to do on a daily basis, because we're like women who have a child. Having been married twice, I've been around several birthings, and it always kind of amazes me that after a woman has a child, the same day perhaps, but certainly by the next day, they're talking about having another one. I think they're absolutely crazy. They don't remember the pain that they went through. If they remembered the pain that they went through, they wouldn't have any more. My sainted grandmother said if men and women could both have babies, a man would have one out of curiosity, and they would have no more. But Mother Nature gives us the possibility of forgetting pain, and that's the problem that we have. We take the same actions over and over again, expecting it to be different this time, and it isn't different, and so we suffer the same pain that we did last time. And because we have good forgetteries is what it really amounts to, and we have to take the action to come to an AA meeting to remember that we're alcoholics, and to remember that of and by ourselves we can't stay sober, and to remember we can't take that first drink, and to remember, we can't pretend to drink. We can't drink near beer, because if we drink near beer, we end up with near sobriety. And who the hell wants near anything? We're not that kind of people. We don't want that. We want the whole thing. We want it good. And we want, we don't want it gold plated. We want the solid gold. And that's what's here. That's what we can go after. That's what we can go after and achieve. There are people in here who've achieved great things, and I've seen people come in who, didn't seem to have the intellect to pour water, clean this one up, out of a boot with directions on the heel, and who have gone to college and they've gotten degrees, who've gotten master's degrees, and who're seeking doctorates, and you think to yourself, my God, here's a life that's been rebuilt. It's been rebuilt right in front of you. There's a fellow I see every year over in Cincinnati, and he's seeking a doctorate in something. I don't know what it is. It's he's up here somewhere as far as I'm concerned, but it's some very complex study that he's been making all these years. I keep asking him every year, and it seems like I've asked him for 10 years. Well, you finished your doctorate yet? He never has finished it, but he's still going to school. And I saw him recently, and he says, I think I have 2 more years, and then I'll be able to write my dissertation. Jesus, how smart is this guy going to get? But they just, the wonders of Alcoholics Anonymous, you see people come into Alcoholics Anonymous and change their lives. I have a fellow that I sponsor, John Smelter, who came down with MS when he was about 3 years sober. John has 28 years now, and he comes to meetings a couple of times a week in a wheelchair, and his speech is slurred, and he can barely stand, and he frequently falls down. But he should have been dead years ago. He should have been dead years ago, because most people who have MS of the type that he has, maybe when it's first diagnosed, they have 15 years. And John has been a diagnosed MS victim for 23, 24, 25 years now. And he comes to the meetings, and he reminds me that you can do the impossible, because it's impossible for him to do what he's doing. But it reminds me that you can do the impossible if you go to meetings, and if you stay sober, and if you're active in Alcoholics Anonymous, and you make yourself available. It's impossible for him to do what he does, but he does it. And every now and then I feel like, well, I get a little cold, or I get a little backache, or a little headache, or something like that. I don't think I'll go to the meeting tonight. And then I think, oh yeah, you don't go to the meeting tonight. John's going to be there. If John can go, why can't you go? And so I just get up and I put my shoes on and get out there, go get in the car and go to the meeting. And we're great reminders to each other. John wouldn't like it to be said of him that he's a dear man, but he's dear to me, I'll tell you, and he's dear to a lot of us who know him, because he never tells us to go to meetings. He just goes to meetings, and by his example, we go to meetings. And I'd like to think that maybe sometimes that's what I do. Maybe I'm a good example sometimes, and people do things just because I do it. I have people come up to me when I go to my home group, and they come up to me and shake hands because their sponsors tell them, you better go shake hands with Dick. He's my sponsor. Why? Because I told you to. Oh, okay. They think it's good luck or something. I don't know what the hell. Maybe if they shake hands with me, they won't end up being like me. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But I think that we as members of Alcoholics Anonymous have to be examples. We have to be good examples for everybody, as good as we can be. And that's one thing that we have to do. And then we have to be accountable. We have to be accountable to. We learn at first to be accountable to our sponsors, and then to the other people that they sponsor probably, and then to the people that are in our group, and then to the group itself, and then to AA beyond that, and to our spouses and to our friends. And being accountable is not always what we want to be. Sometimes we would like to be different than we are, and not have to be accountable. But it's necessary that we be accountable so that we can have some structure in our lives, so that people can expect things from us, and they know who to go to and they know who not to go to. I mean, if you go to somebody and ask them to do something and they don't do it, you don't ask them again. You don't take any chances on that, because there's thousands of other people who can do the same thing, and so you ask someone else next time. And that diminishes that person a little bit. And it's really too bad. But Alcoholics Anonymous is a place where we're generally pretty acceptable of other people and of their failings. And I have a kind of a measurement that I put to people. And because we all judge others, and I certainly am very good at it. And I don't know what you're laughing at. You're better at it than I am. I've been working not to be that. You haven't. But when I judge people now, I try to remember one thing, one criteria, and one criteria alone. Are they helping others? Are they helping others? Are they going out of their way to be helpful to other people? Are they trying to sponsor people? Are they reaching out to the newcomer? Are they doing that? Are they trying to help other people? Are they making that effort? And if they are, and there are, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care what else they do. I can't judge them on the other things because they're human. I'm human. I make mistakes. I do the same thing that you do. I wish I was as perfect as I should think that a person 37 years sober should be, but I'm not. And I never will be. I'm going to keep on trying, and I'm going to do it a day at a time. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. I'm going to keep taking these actions because I can think about these things and I can talk about them all over the place. But if I don't take the actions, they're never going to come to pass. It's just not going to happen. So I have to depend upon the ability, my physical ability, to take the actions that are necessary to take so that my thinking changes. It's one unique thing about Alcoholics Anonymous. It's probably the major ingredient is that we take actions and our thinking changes. We're not shrinks or anything like that. We're not going to tell you to think about anything. We're going to tell you to do things. We're going to tell you to pick up the trash around your seat. We're going to tell you to go to meetings. Just put one foot in front of the other. We're going to tell you to get on your knees and say a prayer. We're going to tell you to be kind to other people. We're going to tell you how we have made amends to other people and show that our relationships have changed. And as a result of that, if you do that, your relationships will change. Sixth and seventh steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are much more important than the space in the big book that allows them to be discussed. They take into account things like going to work on time every day. Going to work and being available to work while you're there. Don't try to sneak away from it. Just be available for work. That's what your employer is paying you for. Do what they ask you to do. And if you do that, the end result of it is that, you'll end up being okay. There's a fellow that I sponsor, and I sponsor him today. He's a good man. And he's been sober many years. He sponsors a lot of guys. And I met him when he first came to AA, and he was in the Air Force, and he was an angry man. But he eventually got sober, got married, and had a couple of kids. But he wanted to know he got out of the service, and I don't know, he had 2 stripes or something like that. And he wanted to know, what am I going to do? He knew something about computers. And I said, well, why don't you go to work for First Data? And he started off in the mail room at First Data. I mean, barely above minimum wage, I'm sure. And today he's a vice president. He was a high school graduate. That's all. But he put his heart to it. And he did the work. And he still does it yet today. And he makes an excellent living. And he sets a good example for the guys that he sponsors. And I couldn't be prouder of it. I mentioned Terry Lindgren. Terry has 28 years today. He's the first person I sponsored when I moved out here from Washington, D.C. When Peggy and I moved out here in 1975 and started sponsoring Terry. He came to meetings and said he was a friend. He was just visiting and all kinds of things. Anything except the fact that he was an alcoholic. He came to a meeting one night, introduced himself, said that he was an alcoholic. We gave him a standing ovation. He hasn't gotten a standing ovation since, but he's a good guy. good AA, good member, always has been involved with reaching out and helping other people, always has been involved with being in service in Alcoholics Anonymous. Service in AA doesn't mean that you're a GSR or a DCM or a delegate or necessarily. That's certainly a part of service. Making coffee at your home group or making coffee at any group is being of service. Picking up a new guy and taking him to a meeting. Taking one home. Having a cup of coffee with somebody who has a problem and listening to them. We don't have the answers here, by the way, if you have problems. But we got the solution. And we know the solution well because the solution is the steps and the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's the solution. Just doing the best you can. Some days, the best you can is long about 8 o'clock at night, and you think to yourself, my God, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. It's just going to be terrible. But, sometimes days are so bad that it's just, come on midnight so I can go to bed and go to sleep. And maybe it'll be a little bit better tomorrow. And it's always better tomorrow. It's never as bad as we think it is. Never, ever as bad as we think it is. Good night's sleep, get up the next morning. It's a little bit better. It's a little bit lighter. Nothing stays terrible forever. It just doesn't. Things are not that way. Life isn't that way. Things get better. They just naturally get better. If you don't stir the pot and make them worse, they'll get better. Sometimes just doing nothing is a great improvement in our lives, I'll tell you. I'm very grateful for my sobriety. I'm very grateful for my wife and my family, and I'm very grateful for my friends and grateful for the people that I sponsor, and I'm grateful for my sponsor who has unfailingly given me good direction for many, many years. And pleased to spend a good deal of time with him here this weekend. And I have been loyal to him to a fault because he has been loyal to me to a fault. And I think that that's what it's all about. I think that's what it's all about. I think learning to have a little bit of integrity in our lives, not being perfect, not having perfect anything. You're not going to have perfect integrity or perfect truth or perfect anything. But if you can have some, if you can be better than you were, if you can today be a better person than you were 15 minutes ago, if you can just keep your mouth shut one more second, if you can just turn away, if you can just forget about it today, then you're going to be much better off. You're lighting your own burden but keeping your mouth shut. It's unbelievable. I want to thank you all for being attentive. I have a friend in AA who I sometimes think that, I'm not a great exciting speaker in Alcoholics Anonymous by any stretch of the imagination, and I well know that. But I don't know who that was. Obviously it wasn't somebody that I sponsor. Anymore. But this friend says that, I just love listening to you because you give me a spiritual rest. And I'm very grateful for that they're able to get that out of their lives, out of my life. That I'm able to give somebody a momentary spiritual rest is a great thing as far as I'm concerned. I hope that you got one this morning. Thank you.